Everybody loves Raimann. Bernhard Raimann, that is. On this episode of Locked On Colts, we bring in a special guest to tell us all about what makes Raimann a good fit for the Colts, as we also discuss the position battles that the rookie will be part of. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Colts fans, thanks so much for tuning in and making us your number one listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am Jake Arthur, joined as always by my partner, Zach Hicks. Today, Zach and I are going to talk to offensive line expert Brandon Thorn of the Trench Warfare newsletter about Colts rookie offensive lineman Bernhard Raimann and the Colts offensive line. Thorn is very well versed in Raimann's game, did a lot of studying on him before the draft, and even spoke with him before the draft. So we'll also get into the position battles at left tackle and right guard and see which players make the most sense in those spots. So without further ado, we've got Brandon here with us. So let's go ahead and get into it. Brandon, how you doing?
Doing good, guys. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Yep. Thanks for joining us. So, of course, Bernhard Raimann, there for the Colts in the third round at pick 77 overall. Was that appropriate for him? Like, with him as a player, was that a good spot for him, or did the Colts get a little bit of a steal?
I thought so, because I saw him, ideally, kind of his best value was, to me, more second round, early second, as kind of a definitely guy who could come in and compete right away and probably start for you. Third round, to me, was a little bit more of, more projection. I guess I could understand it as well. So it wasn't crazy, but it was definitely, to me, I thought more of a steal than, just expected based on my evaluation.
Yeah. And going to your evaluation, when you're looking at Bernhard Raimann's game in college, he's a super athletic guy. He's a guy who was playing out there at that left tackle spot. And this Colts scheme with Chris Strasser and coming from the, the Howard Mudd type of coaching, it's a very aggressive blocking style, especially when it comes to pass pro, a lot of angle sets and such like that. How well do you think Raimann kind of fits into that kind of blocking scheme?
Yeah, I think it is a good fit for him because, I think ideally you kind of utilize some of that initial quickness and lateral quickness that he has to kind of get out there, get to a spot, or get on guys quickly. So I think it fits well with that. And one of my favorite things with his game was how well he was able to create leverage with his hands. And that's one of the things that really kind of jumped out to me, especially considering his background and how inexperienced he was. That's something that you can't really forget when you're watching his tape, that context, because, man, I feel like the LSU-Missouri tapes last year, first two games of the year, I believe, I think he was, less than 10 games into offensive line in his entire life. He played pretty well in those games, but then when you watch him over the course of the rest of the year, granted the competition dropped, but he still faced some pretty good players like, D'Angelo Malone, I think, and a couple other guys that were pretty decent. So even though the competition dropped, you saw him get better as well, which was nice to see. Even though he's an older guy, I still think that, and I've said this before, I think that he's definitely a younger football player, and I think that, there's room there for him to still improve his game, just based on his inexperience level. So, which kind of a double-edged sword, because you obviously ideally don't want a guy super inexperienced because, you don't want him to kind of get thrown into the deep end, and, the NFL game is so much different. And so, yeah, I love the fact that he's going to be playing next to Quentin, if he plays left tackle, and, that obviously helps anybody. So that's big. And then the scheme, like you said, I think kind of the coaching philosophy will kind of fit well with him as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned some of the things that were kind of knocks on him, and it's a very real possibility that it's why he was there at 77. His arms are just a tick under 33 inches. He'll be 25 years old a couple weeks into the season. And I think the Senior Bowl was like his 19th start as an offensive lineman. Do you see those things making it so that he takes a little time to develop, or do you think those are like real issues that may prevent him from playing like left tackle and being the Colts left tackle of the future, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I lean towards more of the optimistic view of him based on his trajectory over the last, couple of years of his college career and just how much better he got. And you could just see him ascending and kind of picking it up more and more. But that said, there is still some technical things that he's really going to have to clean up a lot, partly because of his arm length being under 33. His margin for error just isn't as high as it would be for other guys in terms of strike timing and hand placement and things like that. And he got himself into trouble at the Senior Bowl as well. He also showed, the things that make him so appealing at the Senior Bowl. But one of the things that he showed there and on tape was just getting beat outside and giving up a short corner too quickly. Whether that was not setting deep enough, not setting far enough, and just striking too late, and guys were able to just get the corner too easily. So that, to me, is his Achilles heel going into the pro game that he's going to have to clean up if he's going to stay at tackle. And, the margin for error, like I said, isn't very high. So he has to become even better with his hands and really just kind of clean that up over time. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I would say that he needs to improve on, in the pro game.
Yeah. And the last question we have for you here, man, again, thank you for joining us today and talking a little bit about Bernhard Raimann. But, we're going into this first season where he is a bit older than a typical rookie, 25 years old. So he doesn't really have the luxury of where, you could sit him for 2 or 3 years. You kind of need him to get out there pretty soon. What do you think about his prospects of maybe starting here in year one for the Colts?
I mean, based on, the roster and just kind of the need, at the position of tackle, especially, I think there's an opening for him. He can go out there and win the job if he plays well and picks up things quickly. And, by all accounts, he'll probably pick up things quickly mentally. But yeah, I think it's a pretty good chance, honestly. And, I kind of think back to, they're totally different players, but Garrett Bowles came in 25 years old as well. Mm-hmm. And he struggled badly for, 2, 3, 4 years or whatever. As soon as he got Mike Munchak in.
I think that was with Strasser too, right? It was with Strasser as well.
Yeah, that's funny. I didn't even realize that. But yeah, he struggled badly as an older rookie, and then now here we are, 5 years into his career or whatever, and he's a functional, plus starter by some, evaluators and some people. I think he's probably more of like a middle of the pack starter. But hey, I mean, for an older guy who really struggled for 3 seasons, to turn it around like that, I mean, I think that's kind of, maybe the archetype and a little bit of a career arc. Obviously, you want to see Raimann succeed quicker, and Bowles had a longer leash as a first-round pick. So Raimann may not have that luxury of Bowles just hanging onto the job for longer than he probably should have. But I do think an older rookie can succeed over time, especially if they're a little raw in some areas with technique, which Bowles was. He was a junior college guy. I think he only started 1 year at Utah, if I remember right. So, he came in very inexperienced as well. So, yeah, I mean, I think, there might be some rough patches if he does, win the starting job and he plays in pass protection, cleaning up his hands. But, he just does so many things well, too. Like you touched on his athletic ability, play speed, how well he moves laterally. He can recover pretty well. I think he was stronger than I expected for a guy barely 300 pounds. He finishes. Yep. There's a lot of good things about his game that I think he can lean on, while, that one kind of area in pass protection, hopefully it just gets better and better.
That's a good barometer to start with, of course. Everybody be sure to follow Brandon on Twitter at Brandon Thorn NFL and subscribe to his Trench Warfare newsletter at trenchwarfare.substack.com. Coming up, we'll continue our discussions on the Colts offensive line, starting with the blind side. But first, it's time to get hungry. Zach, do you like chocolate?
I guess, yeah. I don't mind chocolate.
Well, how about coconut?
No, not at all.
Well, that is too bad, because from the people who invented healthy and tasty comes the latest gift to your taste buds. You probably tried the amazing coconut brownie chunk Built Bar, but guess what? Your friends at Built have given Coconut Brownie Chunk the Puffs treatment. That's right, the Coconut Brownie Chunk Built Bar flavor you love in a deliciously chewy marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. It's like a fluffy cloud of coconut brownie goodness. But stop drooling and listen. If you're like me and you've got to watch what you eat, then that probably sounds like a hard no. But listen, they are good for you. Low calorie, low sugar, high protein, and all delicious. Coconut brownie chunk puffs are here only for a limited time. Go to built.com now to make sure you don't miss out. They're going fast because they taste amazing. All Built bars are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you. The best part about Built Puffs, of course, that they taste amazing, but you can also enjoy them guilt-free because they're actually good for you, like we mentioned. They are the perfect treat, perfect for when you've got a craving and you need to satisfy your sweet tooth, or if you need a quick, healthy snack, they are an excellent source of protein. Delicious coconut, rich, sweet brownie, creamy marshmallow. Stop fantasizing and get to Built.com to order your box of coconut brownie chunk Built Puffs right now. Go to Built.com and use the promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off of your order. Use promo code LOCKED15. Which NFL stars move betting lines the most? Starting July 18th, Locked On gives you the 50 most valuable players in the NFL from the odds makers at BetOnline. Available July 18th on Locked On NFL, wherever you get your podcasts. All right, so that was a great conversation with Brandon, very revealing. He knows quite a bit about Bernhard Raimann. And Bernhard is in a kind of an interesting spot as a rookie. Probably not going to be an immediate starter, as we discussed. There's some things to iron out, but he is kind of in the running for two different spots on the offensive line right now. There's left tackle and right guard. First, we'll get into left tackle. It looks like Matt Pryor is going to get the first shake at it. You know, in spring ball, the offensive line was Matt Pryor, Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, Danny Pinter, and Braden Smith. At least from the guys who were there and participating. So what do you think about this left tackle competition in general? Because I know you were a Matt Pryor fan last year.
Yeah, Matt Pryor, just watching his game last year, it was pretty impressive. For a guy who coming into the year when the Colts made that trade for him, I really didn't expect much. I don't know about you, and I don't know about a lot of fans, but I expected, hey, at least this guy's going to be better than LaRaven Clark, Jamarcus Webb. Who are the two guys I had last year? I can't even remember their names right now. Julian Davenport and
Julian Davenport,
Sam Tevy. Yeah. I was like, you know what? He's going to be fine. He's going to be better than those guys. But outside of that, I did not expect anything else. Like I just expected fine. And he ended up playing a good bit of snaps. He came in at right tackle when Julian Davenport was doing Julian Davenport things the first couple games. He replaced him until Braden Smith came back, and he was playing really well out there. I mean, I think he was the highest graded O lineman on the team according to PFF during that stretch. And then later in the season, we saw him play some right guard. I think he played right guard against the Cardinals, and then he played left tackle against the Raiders. And there really wasn't a spot where he looked out of place or he looked poor last year. I mean, left tackle game against the Raiders, I think there was maybe one snap where he got beat. And that was against Yannick Ngakoue the whole time. So he had a really strong season all over the place. And when the Colts re-signed him, they re-signed him to be at left tackle. And that's kind of what the plan is for him. And I think he's kind of earned that first shot. Again, after everything he did last year where he bounced around and he looked good in his 5-6 games at offensive tackle, 1 game at left tackle, there's no reason why he shouldn't get that first crack. Bernhard Raimann, very interesting player. But Matt Pryor, I think right now, is probably the best option at left tackle.
Yeah, I think you're right. Last year after they signed him, or they traded for him, I think they just swapped.
Like a 7th round pick swap or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. In a different trade than the Carson Wentz one with the Eagles. Yeah. But, I was like, that's cool. He's kind of a utility lineman, can play a little here, a little there. And after the Colts let Joe Haig walk a couple years prior, they really needed someone who could fill in just about anywhere in a pinch and do it at a level that it wasn't going to get the quarterback or running backs killed. And honestly, early in the season, I thought Pryor was a godsend because I think it was Julian Davenport who was filling in for Braden Smith at right tackle. And it was just going so poorly. They finally gave Matt Pryor the majority of those snaps until Smith returned. And the only time I really noticed Pryor struggling at any point in the season was against the Cardinals, and he was at one of the guard spots.
Right guard. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And I mean, not many guys flourished in that game. That was at the beginning of the COVID wave that the team experienced at the end of the season. But no, I thought he bounced back well the next week against the Raiders at left tackle. So I thought they would probably sign a veteran left tackle you could be comfortable with, which they eventually did. We'll get into that. But I'm more than happy to let Matt Pryor get the first shake at it. Now, the guy I was alluding to is Dennis Kelly, who's a guy we've talked about for a couple years who the Colts should go after. He's got experience. He started all over the offensive line, everywhere except for center. He could be your right tackle if you needed left tackle in a pinch, whatever. He's just a quality option everywhere. I don't think he's really going to factor into the competition to start, but let's say it's a disaster like last summer. Eric Fisher wasn't ready yet, and they just had to have someone do it, and no one was good enough to claim the spot, and it's just they had to pick someone. Dennis Kelly would be the fallback in that instance, I would assume.
Yeah. I like Dennis Kelly. I think he's a good swing guy, but yeah, he really shouldn't factor into like this battle in the offseason at all. I think Matt Pryor deserves the first shake, but Bernhard Raimann, I mean, Brandon said a lot of good things there, and I tend to believe, it's Brandon Thorn. Of course, I'm going to believe a lot of what he says about the O-line, but he's right on the money with a lot of that stuff. I mean, Bernhard Raimann is an extremely talented athlete. He's picked up the left tackle position really well. And honestly, technically, I didn't see many issues on film with his technical prowess or with a lot of things. Again, a lot of it really comes down to his margin for error is so small when you have those shorter arms and you're playing left tackle. And when you don't have the experience of like a 30 or 40 game plus guy at left tackle, and you also don't have that margin for error, there's going to be some issues. And I think that's where some of the concern comes in. But I really think if he has a strong camp, he should be the starter at left tackle. It's just Matt Pryor deserves the first chance, the first crack. But if Bernhard Raimann looks ready all offseason, I mean, there's no reason not to give it to him. Because, again, the upside's there. He's going to be here longer term than Matt Pryor probably will be as well. So, I mean, while I'm saying Matt Pryor deserves the first shot and Matt Pryor deserved it because of last season, if Bernhard Raimann shows that he's ready, you got to throw him out there because I mean, the potential of him is so much higher than with Matt Pryor. I mean, I'm not saying he's a Joe Thomas type or anything like that, but I think the Garrett Bowles comparison that Brandon was making was right on the money. If you can get a mid-level starter or maybe a fringe top 10 starter at left tackle out of a third round pick, that's a home run. That's a home run on the offensive line. So Bernhard Raimann is a freaky athlete that can do a lot of good things, and I think he's going to be a great fit in this offense.
Yeah, before we move on, just something I was thinking of in regard to Raimann and some of the hurdles. The Colts are very aware of some of the things he'll have to overcome. Chris Strasser, the Colts offensive line coach, was with Garrett Bowles in Denver, so he knows some of the age and being young as a player to the offensive line and left tackle. He knows some of the things to adjust to kind of help that player along. And then as far as the short arms go, when the Colts drafted Braden Smith in the second round back in 2018, that was to be the right guard of the future. But the line just got totally decimated by injuries, and they just by dumb luck, they wound up with him starting at right tackle, and he was good enough to stay there. His measurables were not tackle measurables, but they found out like this guy's good enough, strong enough, athletic enough to work around it. So Braden Smith is known as one of those tackles that's got shorter arms, just like Bernhard Raimann. So I think I mentioned that, or Braden Smith mentioned that during his latest press conference last time we talked to him. So they've seen it before with Garrett Bowles. Chris Strasser has. They've seen it in their own building the last 4 or 5 years with Braden Smith. They know how to get him along and overcome those things. So I don't know how much more we could talk about, right?
No. I just think at the end of the day, it's kind of I don't think it's like saying it's a no-lose situation is probably wrong because there is a way where both these guys are below average this year. But I think if you're just looking at the competition in camp, you have your solid guy in Matt Pryor, and then you have your sky-high upside guy in Bernhard Raimann. So it's just like see how camp goes and see who you want to start there. But, left tackle is probably the most glamorous position on the offensive line. But we've seen in recent years, guys like Mark Lewinsky and Chris Reed, that right guards can be difference makers too. I mean, you guys know me with Chris Reed, so you know how I get about right guards. We'll get to the Colts' new looking right guard spot in a moment. But first, let's get into some bets. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all your latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's Major League Baseball. BetOnline is the continued source for all your sport wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this offseason. Guys, right now on BetOnline, you can go bet the over-under on Matt Ryan's passing yards this season. I know I said this last week, but right now BetOnline has it at 3,850 yards. Now, Matt Ryan has not thrown less than that since 2011. Go place all your bets right now on the over for Matt Ryan, and win yourself some money. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. Bet online, where the game starts. Alrighty, guys, we are going to jump into this right guard spot. And obviously, I have to start this segment off because I just love guards. That's obviously been very – I know Nate is listening to this podcast right now, probably fuming.
Fat guys forever.
Fat guys forever. We love guards here. I mean, Chris Reed is one of my favorite players that's come through the Colts and just been an awesome guy to watch throughout his whole career. But talking about this right guard battle, I'm very interested in it. I think it's really intriguing, kind of under the radar, where Danny Pinter is almost certainly going to be the guy, but there are some guys in camp that could kind of push him for the spot. But Jake, what do you think about Danny Pinter and him being the right guard for this upcoming season?
Yeah, so just kind of as an extension of the last conversation, the biggest X factor in all of this is Bernhard Raimann. So let's say hypothetically he wins the left tackle spot in camp. That forces Matt Pryor probably as the front runner into right guard.
Right.
But that's a hypothetical. It's not super likely, but it could happen. But outside of that possibility, it looks like, Danny Pinter, of course, is the front runner. That's the guy who's been talked up all offseason. But your guy, Will Fries, who the Colts got at the very end of the last draft, that's interesting. That's an interesting move. I think he got just a skosh of playing time near the end of last year when they were so shorthanded. But no, that's another Swiss Army knife guy who can play all over the place. I think he's going to be just bouncing around the interior for them. But I don't see why they wouldn't give him a fair shake at, he'll probably be the second team right guard. And depending on how he looks and Pinter looks, he could easily get reps with the first team if things aren't going well with Pinter.
Yeah, and also I know that he's doing a lot of center work this offseason as well. He probably wants to be that backup center as well. He wants to be a backup tackle. I know they still have him listed on the Colts site as a guard/tackle. So he's another depth guy there too. I mean, he's kind of like their Joe Haig right now is what they're trying to get him to be. And I think the most telling thing about Will Fries is he was a 7th round pick. And if you watch the With the Next Pick series, he got the least amount of time on that. It was just like, hey, we're going to give you a shot to make the team. Like that was it. That was the whole thing that he got on that whole With the Next Pick. But he's a guy who made the roster and wasn't off the roster once the entire year. So they obviously saw something in camp or saw something in practice where it's like, this is a guy that we want to develop and we want to keep around and we want to see what he can do. So I think a lot of what Will Fries was doing behind the scenes last year contributed to, letting Chris Reed walk, for instance, this offseason, because they kind of want Will Fries to be that Chris Reed this season, or maybe be more than that. Again, if Danny Pinter struggles at right guard and they're like, hey, you know what, maybe he's better just as a backup center, we can put Will Fries at right guard and maybe feel better about that, or swing Matt Pryor over. Or I think you were saying a little bit in the practices, was Dennis Kelly getting some right guard snaps too?
Not that I noticed.
Okay. I thought I saw someone mentioning that too.
Someone may have said that, but not that I noticed.
Okay. But yeah, still, I mean, they have options, and I think Will Fries is one of those options, even though I think it's going to be Danny Pinter, and I think Danny Pinter is going to be fine there. Danny Pinter is absurdly athletic. I mean, we're talking about Bernhard Raimann's athleticism. Yeah, Danny Pinter's athleticism is right there with Raimann, maybe even better than Raimann's. I mean, he is a special athlete. So I'm excited to see. Yeah, both of them obviously are special athletes, but I'm curious to see what Pinter can do kind of in like zone blocking calls or when he's like the puller out in space and stuff like that. because in the little bits we've seen of him these past couple of years, whenever he has to get to that second level, I mean, he's out there like that, and it's faster than Ryan Kelly even. So I'm excited to see him at right guard this year.
Yeah, he what I was going to say is both him and Raimann arrived at college as tight ends. So they've got experience there at a more athletic position, and both of their coaches were like, "Man, you're smart, you're capable. We could use you elsewhere." And both of them caught on real quick. We're all conference, so if you're looking for a sort of career comparison, Danny Pinter is kind of a good one, but more we're thinking Raimann is probably going to be more outside during his career.
Right.
But no, another guy that factors into all this as well. Jason Spriggs is a veteran that's played all over the line. He doesn't factor into the starting role, but just we've seen the Colts offensive line get beat up pretty good the last couple of years with injuries at times. So you just kind of see random guys come in the lineup. Spriggs will factor into that if he makes it. Carter O'Donnell even. I think he may have got a snap or two last year. But no, it's Danny Pinter's job to lose as far as I'm concerned. And I don't envision him losing it with how well he's played at center, because Ryan Kelly hasn't had the cleanest bill of health in his career. So over these last 2 years, Pinter has played pretty well, even on short notice. So I think it's Pinter's to win, and Fries could be a very nice depth piece there. I'm really looking forward to seeing him with the second team.
Yeah, it's funny though, if you look at this offensive line group that the Colts have this year compared to what they had last year going into camp, you could probably say the 10th best offensive lineman on this year's team, or maybe even the 11th best offensive lineman, would have been the 7th best one going into camp last year. Because Jason Spriggs, for instance, I feel more comfortable with than Julian Davenport or Sam Tebby.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Those were your 7th and 8th linemen last year going into camp. So Chris Ballard definitely saw what happened after last year's camp and was like, we can't have that again. We're going to get as many talented guys as possible, throwing them in here and seeing what happens. And it might come down to a Spriggs or a Van DeMark or someone getting cut that we don't really expect, but that's because they actually have some depth and have some talent this year. So I'm excited to see how that whole roster shakes up. But I think when it comes to these two battles, Matt Pryor obviously gets the first shot. Bernhard Raimann could surprise at left tackle. But at right guard, I think it's going to be Danny Pinter with, Will Fries just kind of hanging out in the background, maybe being the Chris Reed type.
Yeah, totally agree. I think that's it. And that is all for those discussions as well as today's episode, guys. I wanted to give it a quick shout out before we hop off for the day. And I'm sure a lot of Colts fans, actually, I know a lot of Colts fans by this point have listened. But the Athletics' Zach Kiefer this week put out a 6-part podcast series on the Andrew Luck story. If you haven't listened to it yet, it's very bingeable, and I think it is a must for Colts fans. Just dynamite work. I told Zach, I messaged him and just told him how much I thought about that the other day.
He did. He messaged me and told me how much he thought about Zach Kiefer's podcast. And I was like,
exactly.
Yeah, it's good. It's very good.
Yeah, that's a whole nother joke, guys, if you didn't see it on Twitter. But no, if you just go wherever you listen to podcasts, search for the Athletic Football Show to find that. It's again, it's like the last 6 episodes of that called Luck. I could not stop listening to it, so I'm very proud of him for his work there. And he captured that night Luck retired beautifully. I was there in the press box as well, and I remember we were, the elevators after the game were just completely jammed because everyone wanted to get down in the locker room and see what was going on. Zach and I literally, the press box is at the very top of the stadium. We ran down all of the stairs down to the very bottom floor, weaving through fans and everyone to get through that. And he said, we're going to remember this night for the rest of our lives. And he was right. That show, you just got to listen to it to capture the emotion of that night is just nuts. But anyways, back to Locked On Colts business. We're going to be back with you next week when we become a truly daily Monday through Friday show. It'll be the week before training camp starts. So aside from the latest Colts buzz, we'll kind of put a bow on all of our preparation here and there and bring you guys some good stuff.
Yeah, guys, and go follow all of us here with this podcast at Zach Hicks 2 on Twitter, at Jake Arthur NFL, at Locked On Colts. Go follow all of us there on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook as well. Jake is starting to get that stuff up and rolling. Find all of our written work on Horseshoe Huddle That's where we've been for the last, me for the last, I think, over a year now. And then you've been there for quite a bit there, right, Jake? Like 2 years
Last
now,
March
years?
when it started. Yep.
Shoot. Yeah. Horseshoe Huddle, guys. Go check us out over there. And then also on YouTube. And I swear earlier, Brandon was the guy that was on the podcast, even though you couldn't see his face. But yeah, you could go check us out on YouTube, see all of our beautiful faces there.
Yeah, sorry we're not more handsome, but you guys see.
we have the face made for radio, right? That's what it was.
Exactly. Yeah, guys, thanks again for making Locked On Colts your first listen today. Now make your second listen to Locked On NFL podcast. Our national NFL experts and insiders keep fans dialed in with the biggest stories and the latest news from around the league. Because as you know, an offseason does not equal a break in the action. I'd also be remiss not to mention listening to Locked On Pacers right now. The team just signed or is going to sign free agent DeAndre Ayton to just a big ol' offer sheet. And so, Tony's going to have a lot to say about that, of course. Yep. So you guys go listen to that, catch what he's got to say. And other than that, you guys have a great weekend, and we'll see you every day next week.